I am Joshua, 32 years old, and my family expected me to skip my college graduation to babysit my nephew because they were going on a trip. Before I tell you about how I ended up owning the exact luxury nursing home they tried to force me to pay for, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. It was a Tuesday morning, right in the middle of the third quarter financial review at my company. I was sitting in my corner office, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city skyline. I had a cup of black coffee in one hand and a stack of contractor bids in the other. My life was quiet, structured, and entirely peaceful. I had spent a decade carefully building an impenetrable wall between my current life and the toxic wasteland of my past. Then my computer chimed. An email notification slid across the top right corner of my monitor from an address I had not seen in 10 long years. The sender name was Chloe, my sister. The subject line simply read, "Important family matter." My hand hovered over the computer mouse. My jaw tightened so hard my teeth ground together, and I felt a familiar, icy knot form deep in the pit of my stomach. 10 years of absolute radio-silent peace, and now this. I almost dragged the email straight to the trash folder without opening it. But morbid curiosity is a powerful thing. I clicked open the message, leaned back in my leather chair, and began to read. The email was a disorganized mess of typos, manipulative guilt trips, and outright demands. Chloe wrote that our father, Robert, had been diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's disease about 6 months ago. Our mother, Susan, had developed severe arthritis and could no longer manage the daily upkeep of the house or care for him. Chloe painted a bleak, desperate picture. She claimed she was drowning under the massive pressure of caring for them while trying to raise her teenage son, Brandon. She wrote that our younger brother, Mason, was between jobs and dealing with his own personal struggles, meaning he was utterly useless when it came to helping out. Then came the punchline. They needed help. They needed family. They needed me. Chloe actually had the nerve to ask if my job was flexible enough for me to move back to our hometown to become their full-time caregiver. If I could not drop my entire life to move back, she demanded I start contributing financially. She wanted me to send them $2,000 a month to cover the cost of home health aides, or better yet, pay the enormous monthly fees for a premium assisted living facility they had their eyes on. She ended the email with a masterclass in emotional manipulation. She said our parents talked about me all the time. She claimed they were so incredibly proud of my career success and that life was simply too short for grudges. Family is forever, she wrote. I stared at the screen and let out a harsh, bitter laugh that echoed in the empty office. Proud of me? Talked about me all the time? What an absolute, unadulterated joke. Reading that email did not spark a single ounce of sympathy in my chest. It just transported me right back to the suffocating house I grew up in. A house where I was completely and utterly invisible. I am the oldest of 3 kids. Chloe is 2 years younger than me, and Mason is 4 years younger. To understand the sheer, breathtaking audacity of Chloe's email, you have to understand the dynamic of our household. From the second Mason was born, it was painfully obvious who the favorite was. Golden child syndrome does not even begin to cover it. The sun, the moon, and the stars revolved around Mason. If Mason threw a baseball through the living room window, my parents would blame the glass for being too fragile. If he failed a test, the teacher was incompetent. Because I was the oldest, I was expected to raise myself so they could focus entirely on my siblings. By the time I was 12, I was a self-sufficient unit. I did my own laundry, cooked my own dinners, and managed my own schedule. When I was in high school, I maintained a 3.9 GPA while working 20 hours a week bagging groceries just to have pocket money to buy my own clothes. Meanwhile, Chloe and Mason lived like absolute royalty. Chloe was chauffeured to dance classes 3 times a week, handed money for mall trips, and allowed to host loud sleepovers every weekend. Mason got private tutors whenever his grades slipped even a fraction. I remember sitting at the kitchen table late one Tuesday night, staring at an AP calculus textbook, completely stuck on a problem. I asked my dad for help. He did not even look up from his newspaper. He took a sip of his beer and told me to figure it out myself because that is what smart kids do. The favoritism was aggressive. For my 16th birthday, I came downstairs expecting at least a pancake breakfast. Instead, my parents handed me a cheap envelope. Inside was a $50 gift card to a big box store and a generic birthday card with no personal message, just their signatures. No party, no cake, no celebration. 2 years later, for Chloe's 16th birthday, the contrast was blinding. They rented a massive tent for the backyard, hired a professional DJ, catered a buffet for 50 teenagers, and handed her a brand new MacBook Pro wrapped in a giant silver bow. I stood in the corner of the yard watching Chloe tear the wrapping paper off her expensive laptop. I turned to my mother and calmly pointed out the massive discrepancy. My mother crossed her arms, rolled her eyes, and hit me with the classic excuse. She claimed they were in a different financial situation back then. It was a complete lie. My dad had the exact same management job with the exact same salary. 2 years made absolutely no difference in their bank account, only in their priorities. I learned very early on that complaining got me nowhere. Speaking up only made me the villain in their narrative. So, I built a massive emotional wall around myself. I put my head down, focused entirely on getting straight A's, and formulated a strict exit strategy. I was going to get a scholarship, pack my bags, go to college, and never look back. I thought college would be my great escape. I had no idea my family was just getting started with their betrayal. I busted my absolute hardest in high school. I studied late into the night, skipped parties, and focused on building a resume that no admissions board could ignore. Paid off. I secured a 60% academic scholarship to a highly respected state university about 3 hours away from our hometown. It was not an Ivy League, but it had a phenomenal engineering and project management program. The scholarship covered the bulk of the tuition, but the remaining 40%, plus the exorbitant cost of room and board, was entirely on me. A month before I was supposed to move into my dorm, I sat down with my parents in the living room. I laid out my financial spreadsheets. I swallowed my pride and asked if they could help with just a fraction of the remaining tuition, or maybe chip in for my textbooks. I will never forget the look on my dad's face. He looked at me like I had just asked him to hand over the deed to the house. He let out a dry, condescending chuckle, crossed his arms over his chest, and flat out refused. He explicitly stated that since I was so smart and independent, I could handle the debt. Then he delivered the real sting. He told me they needed to save every spare dollar for a college fund for Chloe and Mason. He looked me dead in the eye and said my siblings were going to need the financial support much more than I did. So I went to war for my education. I did not just work. I ground myself down to the absolute bone. To keep my scholarship, I had to maintain a strict 3.5 GPA. To pay for the rest of my bills, I took on 2 exhausting part-time jobs. I worked at the campus bookstore 20 hours a week, organizing shelves and running the register. On the weekends, I put on a greasy apron and washed dishes in a filthy diner kitchen until 2 in the morning. Between my heavy course load, studying, and working, I was pulling 70-hour weeks consistently. I survived on cheap ramen noodles, peanut butter sandwiches, and whatever leftover fries the diner cook let me take home at the end of my shift. I wore the same 3 pairs of jeans for 4 years. My freshman year roommate, a guy named Wyatt who came from incredible wealth, thought I was clinically insane. Wyatt's parents paid for his tuition in full and gave him an allowance that was higher than my manager's salary at the diner. He would sleep until noon, skip his morning lectures, and still pass his classes because his parents hired expensive private tutors to essentially do his homework. Wyatt would constantly invite me out for pizza and beers, and I would have to sit at the table drinking free tap water because I literally could not afford a $2 slice of pepperoni. While I was drowning in exhaustion and student debt, Chloe was living her absolute best life on my parents' dime. She had enrolled in a local community college, but it was nothing more than a cover story for socializing. My parents bought her a reliable used car, paid her premium cell phone bill, and gave her a credit card for emergencies. She routinely used that emergency card to buy concert tickets, designer clothes, and expensive dinners. Every single weekend, my mom would obsessively like Chloe's party pictures on social media, leaving comments about how beautiful and perfect her daughter was. Then, halfway through Chloe's second semester, the inevitable happened. She got pregnant. She was 19 years old and dating a 23-year-old absolute loser named Jake. Jake worked part-time at a local vape shop and genuinely believed he was on the verge of becoming a famous rapper. He had a SoundCloud account with 40 followers and an ego the size of a blimp. The moment Chloe tearfully told him she was pregnant, Jake panicked. He did not want anything to do with child support, custody battles, or hiring a lawyer. He packed his bags, blocked Chloe on every social media platform, disconnected his phone number, and moved 3 states away to live in his mother's basement. He vanished into thin air. You would logically think my parents would be furious. You would think they would finally cut Chloe off and force her to take some accountability for her actions. Instead, they completely doubled down. My mom actually called the pregnancy a blessing. She claimed everything happens for a reason and that this baby was going to bring so much joy into their lives. Notice she said their lives, not Chloe's life. Chloe dropped out of community college immediately and moved back into my parents' house full-time. During the winter break of my sophomore year, I took the Greyhound bus home. I was exhausted, recovering from finals, and just hoping to get a few days of uninterrupted sleep in my own bed. When I opened the front door, dropped my duffel bag, and walked down the hall, I froze dead in my tracks. My bedroom was completely gone. All my vintage rock posters, my sturdy wooden desk, my bed, everything had been violently ripped out. The walls were freshly painted a soft pastel blue. A massive, expensive wooden crib sat right where my bed used to be. There was a designer changing table, a premium automated rocking chair, and piles of expensive baby clothes with the tags still on them stacked in the corner. My parents had taken every single item I owned, shoved it into cheap garbage bags, and tossed it into the damp, dusty garage. I marched into the kitchen and found my mom calmly chopping vegetables. I demanded to know what happened to my room. She did not even stop chopping. She casually stated they needed the space for the nursery. When I pointed out that Mason, who was only 16 at the time, still had his massive master-style bedroom completely untouched, she snapped at me. She told me I did not really live there anymore anyway, so my space did not matter. When baby Brandon was born, the household dynamic shifted from toxic to pure insanity. My parents did not act like grandparents. They acted like they had just been handed a do-over baby. My dad, the man who refused to help me with math homework, was suddenly doing midnight feedings and rocking the baby to sleep. My mom changed the diapers, sterilized the bottles, and pushed the luxury stroller around the neighborhood. Chloe essentially treated her own son like a cute accessory. She slept until noon, went out shopping with her friends, and let our parents do 100% of the heavy lifting. I watched this circus from a distance, pulling all-nighters, fighting a brutal war to keep my GPA high enough to maintain my scholarship, completely alienated from the people who shared my last name. But I kept telling myself it would all be worth it. Graduation was the finish line. I thought that walking across that stage in my cap and gown would finally force them to acknowledge my existence. I was dead wrong. By the spring of my senior year, I had completely burned myself out, but the suffering finally paid off. I had sent out over 50 resumes, driven hours for in-person interviews, and finally secured an incredible job offer. A mid-sized manufacturing firm hired me as a junior project coordinator. The starting salary was fantastic, the benefits package was solid, and I was scheduled to start my new career exactly 2 weeks after graduation. I was going to be the first person in my entire extended family to graduate with a 4-year university degree. This was my moment. This was the ultimate validation I had been bleeding for over the last 4 years. In early February, a full 3 months before the ceremony, I decided to call my parents to lock the date into their calendar. May 18th, a Saturday. My mom answered the phone. I could hear toddler Brandon screaming in the background, banging toys against the hardwood floor. I cheerfully gave her the dates, the time of the ceremony, and told her I could secure 4 premium tickets for her, Dad, Chloe, and Mason to sit near the front. There was a long, incredibly heavy silence on the line. Then, my mom let out a dramatic sigh. "Oh, honey, we're actually not going to be able to make it. My grip on my cell phone tightened so hard my knuckles instantly turned white. What do you mean you can't make it? I am telling you 3 months in advance. The date has been set since last year. Well, she said casually, as if she were talking about the weather, your father and I just booked a cruise. We are taking Chloe and Brandon to the Bahamas that week. It has been really stressful for Chloe being a single mom, and she just needs a change of scenery to decompress. We leave on the 16th and get back on the 22nd. I stopped breathing. The floor in my cheap apartment felt like it was violently tilting beneath my feet. They booked a luxury cruise, with the money they claimed they absolutely did not have for my college tuition. And they deliberately booked it over the one weekend that mattered to my entire academic career. Mom, this is my college graduation, I said, my voice shaking with a potent mix of blind rage and utter disbelief. I have worked 2 miserable jobs for 4 years to get to this stage. You cannot miss this for a vacation. Oh, sweetheart, don't be dramatic, she scoffed dismissively. The trip is completely non-refundable. Besides, you are so fiercely independent. We figured you wouldn't even care if we were there. You will have plenty of other big moments in your life. We can celebrate when we get back. I did not scream. I did not throw my phone. I just quietly said, okay, and hung up. I sat on the edge of my thrift store mattress and stared at the blank wall for an hour. That was it. That was the absolute, undeniable proof of exactly what I meant to them. I was an afterthought. But somehow they found a way to make it worse. Exactly a week later, my mom called back. I almost ignored it, but a sick sense of curiosity made me answer. Hey, honey, so I have a favor to ask, she chirped. What? I snapped, not hiding the hostility in my voice. Well, since we are going on the cruise and you do not have any family coming to graduation anyway, we were thinking Mason could just drive up to your apartment that weekend. You can watch Brandon for a few days so Mason does not have to go on the cruise with us. He has a big video game tournament online that weekend and needs the house to be quiet. I squeezed my eyes shut. A harsh, involuntary laugh ripped out of my throat. The sheer audacity was staggering. Let me get this completely straight. You are skipping my college graduation to go on a vacation. And now, you want me to skip my own graduation ceremony to babysit Chloe's kid, so that Mason can play video games. The ceremony is just a formality, she argued, her tone instantly turning defensive and sharp. You still get the piece of paper in the mail whether you walk or not. Chloe really needs this break, and Mason needs to focus on his gaming tournament. Family is supposed to help each other out. No, I said flatly, my voice dropping an octave. I am walking across that stage. Find a babysitter. Or better yet, Chloe can step up and watch her own son. Her voice turned incredibly vicious. You are so unbelievably selfish. We ask you for one tiny favor to help this family function, and you act like this? Fine, be selfish. But if you do this, if you refuse to help your family when we need you, do not expect us to be there when you need something. Don't bother coming home for the holidays. Consider yourself cut off. You cannot cut off someone you never supported in the first place, I said. Have a nice cruise. Don't ever call me again. I ended the call. I immediately blocked her phone number. I blocked my dad's number. I blocked Chloe and Mason on every single social media platform. I completely severed the cord. Graduation day was bright, sunny, and beautiful. I did not have a cheering section of blood relatives holding up embarrassing signs. Instead, I had 2 professors who had mentored me through my toughest classes, my former boss from the campus bookstore, my girlfriend at the time, and a few close college friends. When the dean called my name over the loudspeaker, I walked across that stage, grabbed my leather-bound diploma, and felt a massive, suffocating weight lift off my shoulders. I smiled for the cameras. I went out for a massive steak dinner afterward. I did not shed a single tear for the family that was floating on a boat in the Bahamas. I was finally truly free. The next 10 years of my life were a masterclass in building an empire from absolutely nothing. I dove into my career with a level of aggression and razor-sharp focus that shocked my supervisors. I was always the first person in the office, brewing the coffee, and the last one to leave, turning off the lights. I volunteered for the most complex projects, the ones everyone else desperately avoided because they required too much overtime. Within my first 2 years, my relentless work ethic paid off. I received a massive promotion to project coordinator. My salary jumped significantly, and I finally moved out of my cramped, depressing apartment into a modern, spacious townhouse in a great neighborhood. It was during this period of intense professional growth that I met Amy. Amy was an accountant who worked for a firm on the 4th floor of my office building. We constantly bumped into each other at the artisan coffee shop in the lobby. One morning, I was reviewing a chaotic spreadsheet on my phone and accidentally bumped into her, spilling half my Americano on her beige shoes. Instead of yelling or demanding my insurance, she just threw her head back and laughed, handing me a napkin. We went on our first official date that Friday, and I knew within 20 minutes that I was going to marry her. Amy was a revelation. She came from a large, loud, incredibly loving family that actually enjoyed spending time together. Her parents had been married for over 30 years and still held hands when they walked down the street. In her family, there was no golden child. There was no secret manipulation. There were no emotional ultimatums. They just fiercely loved each other. The first time I went to her parents' house for a holiday dinner, I sat at their massive oak dining table feeling completely overwhelmed. Her father, Matthew, a retired construction manager with a booming laugh, poured me a cold beer. He looked me dead in the eye and asked me about my career goals. He did not interrupt me. He did not belittle my ambitions. He actually listened, nodding thoughtfully. Later that night, as Amy and I were putting on our coats to leave, Matthew pulled me aside, clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder and said, "You're a good man, Joshua. I'm proud Amy brought you home." I barely made it to the driver's seat of my car before I broke down. I sat gripping the steering wheel, tears blurring my vision. It was the first time in my entire life a father figure had ever looked at me with genuine pride and said those words. Amy and I got married 2 years later. It was a beautiful, intimate ceremony held in a lush botanical garden. My side of the aisle was filled with loyal friends, professional mentors, and colleagues who respected me. Amy's side was packed with her vibrant, endlessly supportive family. Not a single person from my biological family was invited. They did not even know I was engaged. I did not send a single invitation, and I did not lose a single second of sleep over their absence. When it came to funerals and weddings, I wanted people who actually cared about me. Professionally, my trajectory was completely untouchable. By my late 20s, a massive corporate logistics and real estate development firm poached me from my mid-sized company. They offered me a position as a senior project manager overseeing multimillion-dollar corporate acquisitions. The salary they offered was astronomical, far exceeding what my parents ever dreamed of earning combined. When I turned 30, I decided to reward myself for a solid decade of flawless, grinding hard work. I walked into a luxury dealership, pointed at a brand-new, jet-black Porsche 911, and paid for it. Driving that car off the lot, gripping the hand-stitched leather steering wheel, listening to the aggressive roar of the engine, I felt completely invincible. I had built an absolute fortress. I had a beautiful, intelligent wife, a brilliant career, immense financial stability, and a chosen family that had my back unconditionally. Throughout all of this, the promotions, the wedding, buying the house, buying the Porsche, my biological family remained completely and utterly silent. Not a single birthday text. Not a random email. Not a postcard. They were fiercely honoring their threat to cut me off, and honestly, it was the greatest gift they ever gave me. Until Chloe's email arrived in my inbox, shattering a decade of perfect silence. After reading her desperate plea for cash and free labor to save our parents, I stared at the bright computer screen for a long time. I did not feel angry. My heart was not racing. I just felt an icy, calculated calm wash over me. I could have just deleted the email. Amy, always the peacemaker, gently suggested I ignore it and leave the past buried in the past. But simply ignoring it would not send the definitive message I needed to send. I replied to Chloe's email. I did not yell. I kept it brutally brief and professional. Chloe, thanks for reaching out after a decade of silence. I am sorry to hear about Robert and Susan's declining health. However, I am afraid I will not be able to help. Mom made it very clear 10 years ago that I am an incredibly selfish person. Because I am so selfish, it would not be fair to force Mom and Dad to rely on someone like me during this difficult time. I am sure you and Mason can handle this. Family helps each other out, right? Please do not contact me again unless it is to notify me of a funeral. Best of luck. I hit send. I felt nothing but pure, unadulterated satisfaction. 2 days later, Chloe somehow bypassed my email block and left a frantic, hysterical voicemail on my office phone. She begged for an in-person meeting. She named a specific luxury nursing home facility located on the upscale side of our hometown, claiming she was touring it for our parents. She begged me to just meet them in the lobby to talk. When I heard the name of the facility on the voicemail, a slow, incredibly sharp smile spread across my face. It was almost too perfect. The irony was absolutely delicious. I immediately cleared my afternoon schedule. I was going to this meeting. I drove my jet black Porsche out of the city and pulled into the manicured, pristine parking lot of the Oakwood Luxury Senior Living Center. The facility was absolutely stunning. It looked more like a 5-star resort than a nursing home. It boasted vaulted glass ceilings, imported marble floors, a grand piano playing softly in the lobby, and private dining rooms with personal chefs. It was the exact kind of place that cost upwards of $8,000 a month. I walked through the automatic glass doors wearing a tailored charcoal suit and a heavy silver Rolex. I scanned the massive lobby and spotted them immediately, sitting huddled together on a plush velvet sofa in the far corner. Time and karma had not been kind to my family. My father, Robert, looked incredibly frail, his posture sunken, his hands shaking slightly in his lap from the Parkinson's. My mother, Susan, looked exhausted, bitter, and older than her years, her hands curled from arthritis. Chloe was sitting next to them, looking ragged, her hair messy and her clothes wrinkled, and leaning against the marble pillar, staring at his phone with a bored expression, was Mason. He was 28 now, overweight, wearing a stained graphic tee and cargo shorts, looking exactly like the basement-dwelling failure he was. As I approached the seating area, Susan looked up. Her tired eyes widened slightly at the sharp cut of my expensive suit, but she quickly masked her surprise with her familiar, disapproving scowl. "You came," Chloe said, standing up and trying to force a welcoming, utterly fake smile. "I came because I wanted to look you directly in the eyes when I tell you no," I said smoothly, refusing to sit down. Mason scoffed from his spot against the pillar. "Always an arrogant jerk, aren't you? Look at you, walking in here wearing a fancy suit like you're better than us. You owe them, man. You need to step up and be a man for once in your life." I slowly turned my head and looked Mason up and down, taking in his pathetic appearance. "You are 28 years old, living in their basement, playing video games while they go bankrupt. Don't ever use the word man in my presence." Mason's face flushed a dark, furious red, but he cowered down and did not step forward. My mother slammed her curled hand on the armrest. "Enough, both of you. Joshua, look around. This place is absolutely perfect for us. They have 24-hour premium nursing care and physical therapy. But the down payment is steep and the monthly fees are high. We know you have a very lucrative corporate job now. It is your absolute duty as our oldest son to sign the guarantor paperwork and cover the monthly difference." "My duty?" I laughed out loud, a sharp sound that echoed off the marble walls and turned a few heads in the lobby. "Where was your duty when I was eating garbage and working 70 hours a week to pay for my college? Where was your duty when you went on a luxury cruise instead of coming to my graduation? You made your choices. You funded Chloe's mistakes. You funded Mason's pathetic existence. You blew your retirement savings. That sounds like a massive you problem, not a me problem. We are your parents," my father barked, his voice trembling but attempting to be loud and authoritative. "You will show us respect. You will pay for this facility, or I swear to God. Or what? I interrupted, leaning down slightly, my voice dropping to a deadly, quiet whisper. You'll cut me off? Again? You have zero leverage here. You are absolutely nothing to me. Chloe immediately started crying loudly, a pathetic, theatrical wail clearly meant to draw the attention of the staff. You can't do this to us. They'll end up in a terrible state-run facility. Have a heart, Joshua. Right at that exact moment, the heavy mahogany doors of the administrative wing swung open. A tall, distinguished man in a navy suit walked out, flanked by the facility director holding a clipboard. It was Carter, the CEO of my corporation. Carter scanned the room and spotted me instantly. His face lit up with a massive smile, and he strode directly across the lobby toward our group, completely ignoring my sobbing sister and angry parents. Joshua, Carter boomed, extending his hand enthusiastically. I didn't know you were touring this location today. I was just reviewing the final transition paperwork with the director. I shook his hand firmly, keeping my expression perfectly neutral. Just handling some very minor personal business in the area, Carter. How are the numbers looking? Incredible, Carter beamed. He turned to my parents, putting on his best, polished customer service smile. Are these folks looking to become residents? They couldn't be in better hands. Carter turned back to me and patted my shoulder. You all must be very proud of Joshua. He just spearheaded the corporate acquisition of this entire regional chain of living centers. As of last Tuesday, Joshua is the executive vice president of operations for this entire brand. Technically, he owns the chair you're sitting on. The silence that fell over my family was absolute. It was deafening. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my life. Susan's mouth actually fell open, her jaw dropping. Robert stared at me, his eyes wide with a profound terror I had never seen before. Chloe choked on her fake tears, gasping for air, and Mason physically dropped his phone on the hard marble floor with a loud, satisfying crack. They weren't just asking me for money. They were trying to manipulate me into paying exorbitant rent to my own company. I looked at my mother. I watched the brutal realization wash over her pale face. She was looking at a man who held absolute power, immense wealth, and total authority over the one thing she desperately wanted. A man she had callously thrown away for a week in the Bahamas. Like I told you 10 years ago, I said, my voice smooth and cold as glass. I am incredibly selfish. You will not be living here. Not on my dime. Not on anyone's dime. You are officially denied entry to this facility. I turned to Carter, adjusting my suit jacket. These people were just leaving. Let's head to your office, Carter. We have numbers to run. I did not look back. I walked away, leaving them sitting helplessly in the lobby of a luxury facility they would never, ever be able to afford, completely broken by the crushing weight of their own consequences. De la koan kak they doi tat ca, kai tua koi kung de lay lai duak win kim so kuak doi min, kam on ban de kien and kung tua den day, ban that tuet voi, hey jup tua like video va ben luan so one ben dui, de tua beat ban de dong han kung tua toi day, junai kong chi jup nu nuoi han tim thay ka chuyen nai, ma kan cho tua beat rang and hung tre niam qua tua ko wai nia voi ai do. Suung ho qua ben la dong luk lon not de tua tip tiu si chia se and hung fan kan lai qua han trin nai. The emotional fallout from that day in the lobby was incredibly swift and absolutely brutal. I walked out of those glass doors, climbed into my Porsche, blasted rock music, and drove back to the city. That night, I took Amy out to a phenomenal, wildly expensive steak dinner to celebrate closing the darkest chapter of my life. I truly thought that was the absolute end of the saga. I had delivered my final, devastating blow, and they were finally out of my orbit. But the universe and karma were not quite done with them yet. About 3 weeks after the incident at the Oakwood facility, my phone buzzed while I was making breakfast. It was an unknown number, but something deep in my gut told me to answer it. Hello, I said, leaning against the kitchen counter. Joshua? It's your cousin, Elijah. Elijah and I used to play basketball together in my driveway when we were kids, but we had drifted apart after I went to college and cut ties with the family. He was a good guy, straightforward, honest, and completely immune to family drama. Elijah, wow, it has been a long time. What is going on? Elijah let out a heavy, exhausted sigh. Listen, man, I need to apologize to you. The whole extended family does. We owe you a massive apology. Chloe has been running her mouth for the last 6 months, telling all the aunts, uncles, and cousins that you completely abandoned your parents in their hour of need. She painted this tragic, heroic picture of herself as the martyr daughter, sacrificing her youth to change their bandages and cook their meals while you lived in a mansion and selfishly ignored them. I rolled my eyes, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Of course she did. Let me guess, the whole victim routine was just a setup because she was asking the family for money? Exactly, Elijah said, his voice tightening with suppressed anger. Uncle Aaron actually felt so incredibly bad for them that he was preparing to cut them a massive check from his own retirement savings to help with their medical bills. But last week, I decided to drop by their house unannounced to bring some groceries and see how bad things really were. Joshua, it was a complete disaster. Elijah went on to describe a scene straight out of a nightmare. He walked into the house and found Robert and Susan struggling to even get up from the soiled couch. The house was a filthy mess. Chloe was not cooking or cleaning. She was lounging out by the backyard pool, tanning and drinking margaritas, screaming at Susan through the screen door to order a pizza because she was hungry. Mason was locked in the basement, screaming violently at his video game console. Brandon, Chloe's teenage son, was sitting in the kitchen cursing at his grandparents because the internet speed was too slow for his liking. I cornered Chloe in the kitchen, Elijah explained, his tone completely disgusted. I demanded to see where the money was going. They had no inheritance left from our grandparents. They had no savings. Do you know what she has been doing? She took total control of their bank accounts. She has been using their disability checks and meager pensions to buy designer handbags, fund her weekend vacations, and pay for premium streaming gear for Mason. She was literally bleeding them dry while treating them like absolute garbage. I gripped my coffee mug tightly. I was not entirely surprised, but hearing it confirmed out loud was still staggering. What did you do? I blew the whole damn thing wide open, Elijah said fiercely. I took pictures of the filthy house. I took screenshots of her selfish bank transfers. I put every single piece of evidence in the massive family group chat. I exposed every single lie she told. I even pulled up old Facebook posts proving that they went on a luxury cruise the exact same weekend as your college graduation. I showed everyone that you didn't abandon them. They abandoned you, and Chloe was just scamming the family. The mental image of my extended family finally realizing the ugly truth brought a genuine, peaceful smile to my face. Uncle Aaron was furious, Elijah continued. He drove over to their house the very next day. He stood in their living room and told your dad that he had made his bed and now he had to lie in it. Aaron canceled the check, formally withdrew all financial support, and told the entire extended family that anyone who gives Chloe or Mason a single dime is dead to him. My toxic parents were now completely cut off from the entire family tree. No bailouts, no sympathy, no secret funds, no inheritance to fall back on. They were entirely at the mercy of the two selfish leeches they had spent their entire lives protecting and spoiling. Elijah asked me if I wanted to join the group chat, to receive their apologies directly and reconnect with the family. I politely declined. I thanked him for his honesty and for standing up for the truth, but I told him my life was perfectly peaceful now, and I did not want any connection back to that world. The storm had finally broken. The lies were exposed. My parents were left with the exact family they had chosen over me. You would think that after my cousin Elijah blew the whistle and completely dismantled my sister's lies in front of the entire extended family, the dust would finally settle. You would think that my parents, having been publicly exposed and financially cut off by their own siblings, would retreat into the shadows and leave me alone. But toxic family systems do not just politely pack up and go home when they lose. They scramble. They get desperate. and when the front door is slammed in their faces, they try to crawl through the basement window. About a month after Elijah's explosive revelation in the family group chat, my phone rang on a Sunday afternoon. I was in my backyard, grilling steaks and throwing a tennis ball for my golden retriever, Cooper. Amy was sitting on the patio, reading a book in the sun. It was a picture-perfect weekend. I looked at the caller ID and saw the name Mary. Aunt Mary is my mother's younger sister. Growing up, she was the family member who always played the role of the gentle peacemaker. She never raised her voice. She always brought an overly sweet pie to Thanksgiving. And she had a habit of smiling sympathetically when my parents openly favored Mason and Chloe. But here is the thing about Aunt Mary. Her sympathy was completely hollow. She never actually stepped in. She never defended me. She just watched the abuse happen, offered a sad little smile, and went right back to eating her dinner. I handed the grill tongs to Amy, wiped my hands on a towel, and answered the call. "Hello, Aunt Mary," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level and guarded. "Oh, Joshua, sweetheart," she breathed into the phone, her voice dripping with an exaggerated, syrupy warmth. "It is so incredibly wonderful to hear your voice. It has been far too long. How are you? How is your lovely wife doing?" "We are doing exceptionally well, Mary. What can I do for you?" I was not in the mood for small talk. I knew exactly why she was calling. The family grapevine was buzzing, and she had been drafted as the final, desperate ambassador for my parents. She let out a long, theatrical sigh. "Joshua, I am calling because my heart is just breaking. I know everything that has happened. I know what Elijah posted, and I know your parents have made some very terrible, unfortunate mistakes. They are deeply struggling right now, physically and financially. Your mother cries every single day. Your father is getting worse. They are so incredibly sorry for how things escalated at the nursing home." I leaned against the brick siding of my house and watched my dog chase a butterfly across the perfectly cut grass. Did they actually use the words, "We are sorry for what we did to Joshua"? Or are you just assuming they feel that way because they ran out of money? There was a very long, uncomfortable pause on the line. I had broken the script she had rehearsed in her head. "Well," she stammered, her sweet tone faltering for a second. "They did not use those exact words, no. But Joshua, they are your parents. You only get one mother and father in this life. They are getting old and they are terrified. You are a successful, wealthy man now. Surely you can find it in your heart to forgive them. Can you at least agree to sit down with them? Maybe find some small, manageable way to help them out financially? It doesn't have to be the luxury facility. Just something to ease their burden." I listened to her entire speech. I let the silence hang in the air for a few seconds before I responded. I wanted my words to hit with absolute precision. "Aunt Mary, I appreciate you trying to play the diplomat, but the answer is definitively no. They had 10 years to apologize to me. They had 10 years to pick up the phone. They did not reach out when I got my first major corporate promotion. They did not reach out when I bought my first house. They did not reach out when I married the love of my life. They only reached out when their bank accounts ran dry and they needed a human ATM to fund their bad decisions. That is not family. That is blatant, shameless opportunism." "Joshua, please," she begged, her voice rising in pitch, a sharp edge of panic bleeding through the sweet facade. "You have to be the bigger person here. If you do not help them, I do not know what is going to happen to them. They have absolutely nothing left. Chloe is refusing to get a job, Mason is still living in their basement, and the medical bills are drowning them. You have to step in. You have to save them." And right then, in that exact moment, the final puzzle piece clicked into place in my mind. I suddenly understood the real reason Aunt Mary was calling. This was the final twist. "This isn't about me being the bigger person, is it, Mary?" I asked, my voice dropping to a low, cold register. "What do you mean?" she asked defensively. "You don't actually care if my parents and I reconcile," I stated, the realization washing over me. "You don't care about healing our family trauma. You are terrified because Uncle Aaron cut them off. You are terrified because their savings are completely gone. You know that if they lose their house, they are going to come knocking on your door. You are calling me to guilt-trip me into paying their bills because you are desperately trying to protect your own assets. You want me to take the financial bullet so you don't have to. The silence on the other end of the phone was absolute. It was the heavy, breathless silence of a person who had just been completely and thoroughly unmasked. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. "Listen to me very carefully, Mary," I continued, my voice entirely devoid of emotion. "They are not my problem, and they are not my responsibility. They made it very clear 10 years ago that I only mattered when I was useful to them. Well, I am not useful to them anymore, and they do not matter to me. Do not ever call this number again." I hung up the phone. I didn't block her. I just deleted the contact. I walked back over to the grill, flipped the steaks, and smiled at my wife. The final tie was severed. The last remaining ghost of my past had been exorcised. Fast forward 2 years. The passage of time is the ultimate equalizer. It reveals the truth of the foundations we build our lives upon. Over those 2 years, Amy and I flourished in ways I never thought possible when I was a broke college kid eating leftover diner fries. My career continued its aggressive upward trajectory. I successfully integrated the luxury nursing home chain into our corporate portfolio, earning a massive bonus that I immediately invested. Amy made full partner at her accounting firm. We traveled the world. We spent 2 weeks in Greece, staying in a beautiful white villa overlooking the sparkling Aegean Sea. We drank incredible wine, ate fresh seafood, and spent our days exploring ancient ruins. We took a trip to Germany to hike the Bavarian Alps, and we spent a vibrant, chaotic week in Brazil. We were living out the exact dreams my parents had tried to steal from me. We expanded our family, not with children yet, but by adopting a second rescue dog. We hosted massive, loud, joyous holiday dinners at our home. My father-in-law, Matthew, would sit at the head of my table, carving the turkey, telling stories, and making everyone laugh. Our house was filled with warmth, genuine respect, and unconditional love. I had meticulously built the exact family dynamic I had been denied my entire life. But karma was executing a very different plan for the people I left behind. I didn't seek out information about my biological family, but occasionally, updates would filter through the family grapevine via my cousin Elijah. He liked to check in every few months, and he never held back the brutal reality of what was happening on the other side of the tracks. Without my financial bailout, and without the extended family's charity, my parents hit a brick wall at 100 miles an hour. The medical bills from my father's Parkinson's and my mother's severe arthritis piled up into a mountain of debt. Chloe continued to absolutely refuse to find meaningful employment, complaining that minimum wage jobs were beneath her dignity. Mason, the supposed golden child, remained firmly planted in the basement, furiously clicking away at his computer, waiting for a streaming career that was never, ever going to happen. Eventually, the bank came knocking. My parents were forced to sell the sprawling, comfortable suburban 4-bedroom house I grew up in. The house where I was treated like a ghost. The house where they had eagerly converted my bedroom into a nursery. They sold it at a loss just to clear their immediate debts and avoid total bankruptcy. With whatever meager funds they had left from the sale, they had to quickly find a new place to live. Because their credit was ruined and their income was restricted to basic disability and Social Security checks, their options were incredibly limited. They ended up signing a lease on a cramped, poorly maintained 2-bedroom apartment in a highly undesirable, noisy part of town. Think about that logistical nightmare for a second. 6 people, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. According to Elijah, the living situation is an absolute, unmitigated psychological hell. My parents, both suffering from severe physical ailments, took 1 bedroom. Chloe, who still fully believes she is the victim of the universe, shares the 2nd tiny bedroom with her teenage son, Brandon. Brandon is now 15, angry, rebellious, and deeply resentful of his living conditions. He constantly screams at his mother and grandparents, treating them with the exact same lack of respect they showed me. And Mason, the beloved golden child? At 30 years old, he sleeps on a cheap pull-out couch in the middle of the cramped living room. He has no privacy, no space, and no prospects. He works part-time at a local call center, a job he absolutely despises, just to pay for his internet connection and energy drinks. They are all trapped together in a tiny, suffocating box of their own making. They spend their days arguing over grocery bills, fighting for bathroom time, and loudly blaming each other for their miserable existence. The parents who enabled the monsters are now permanently locked in a cage with them. They sacrifice their oldest, most capable son to protect their favorites, and their reward is a lifetime of poverty, resentment, and inescapable misery. There is a profound, almost poetic justice in how the universe balanced the scales. I am living in a beautiful home, surrounded by peace and prosperity, traveling the world. They are crammed into a 2-bedroom apartment, drowning in the bitter consequences of decades of toxic favoritism and manipulative choices. They wanted me to be their savior, but they forgot that you cannot expect a life raft from the person you deliberately threw overboard. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is completely quiet and the only sound is the soft breathing of my dogs sleeping on the rug, I walk out onto my back patio. I look up at the stars. I look at the beautiful home I own, and I let myself reflect on the long, brutal road it took to get here. 10 years ago, when I was sitting on that cheap mattress in my college apartment, listening to my mother tell me they were choosing a cruise over my graduation, I thought my world was ending. I felt a level of rejection that burned straight through to my bones. I felt completely unlovable. I felt like an absolute failure, simply because the people who brought me into this world decided I was not worth their time or their resources. But looking back now, from the vantage point of a man who has built an empire, I realize something incredibly profound. That rejection was not a curse. That rejection was the greatest, most valuable gift my parents ever gave me. If they had shown up to my graduation, if they had offered me a few scraps of financial support, if they had given me the bare minimum of parental affection, I might have stayed trapped in their toxic orbit. I might have spent my entire adult life desperately tap dancing for their approval, constantly setting myself on fire to keep them, Chloe, and Mason warm. I would have been the designated family ATM, slowly drained of my wealth, my energy, and my sanity. By pushing me away, by issuing that ridiculous, manipulative ultimatum, they completely severed the chains. They forced me to realize that I was the only person coming to save me. They forced me to cultivate a level of resilience, grit, and ruthless ambition that propelled me to the top of my industry. Every promotion, every raise, every successful project was fueled by the burning desire to prove that I was not the worthless afterthought they believed I was. They also gave me the gift of the word selfish. For years, I let that word haunt me. When my mother called me selfish for wanting to attend my own graduation, it stung. It made me question my own morality. But over time, I took that word back. I reclaimed it. I realized that in a family dynamic built entirely on exploitation, having healthy boundaries will always be labeled as selfishness by the people who want to exploit you. I am selfish. I am selfish with my peace. I am selfish with my time. I am selfish with the hard-earned money I bled for. I am entirely selfish when it comes to protecting the beautiful, peaceful life I have built with Amy. And I refuse to apologize for it. We are taught by society that blood is thicker than water. We are aggressively conditioned to believe that just because someone shares our DNA, we owe them our endless loyalty, our money, and our mental health. We are told to forgive and forget, to turn the other cheek, to accept abuse because they are still your parents or they are still your siblings. That is one of the most dangerous, toxic lies we are ever sold. Family is not an unconditional free pass for abuse. Being a parent does not grant you a lifetime license to manipulate, neglect, and exploit your children. Respect is earned. Love is an action, not a genetic obligation. If a relationship is destroying your peace, draining your resources, and actively harming your mental health, you have the absolute right to walk away. You have the right to close the door, lock it, and throw away the key. I chose my family. I chose Amy. I chose my father-in-law, Matthew, who showed me more genuine parental pride in one evening than my biological father showed me in 2 decades. I chose the mentors who guided my career. I chose the friends who stood by me when I was eating ramen noodles and working 70-hour weeks. That is my family. For anyone listening to this story right now who is trapped in a similar dynamic, who is the scapegoat, the forgotten child, the designated ATM for a family that never appreciates you, I need you to hear me clearly. You do not owe them your life. You do not owe your success to the people who actively bet against you. You do not have to carry the heavy, suffocating baggage of their terrible decisions. You are allowed to put yourself first. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to walk away from the table when respect is no longer being served. It will be painful. The guilt will eat at you at first, because you have been heavily conditioned to feel responsible for their happiness. But once you push through that initial guilt, once you establish an unbreakable boundary, you will find a level of peace and freedom that you never knew existed. You will discover that the energy you spent trying to fix a broken family can be used to build a spectacular life of your own. My parents made a choice 10 years ago. They chose a week-long vacation in the Bahamas over a lifetime relationship with their oldest son. They chose to enable their 2 youngest children into absolute, crippling dependency. Every single thing they are experiencing right now, the poverty, the cramped apartment, the endless arguments, is the direct mathematical result of their own actions. Actions have consequences. I am simply refusing to shield them from the consequences they carefully built for themselves. I survived the storm, and I emerged as the one steering the ship. I am Joshua. I am 32 years old. I am a highly successful executive, a loving husband, and a fiercely independent man. And yes, according to the people sitting in a miserable 2-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of town, I am incredibly selfish. Conveniently, it's never too late to set boundaries to protect your life. In this life, there's a harsh truth we must face. Not all those who share the same bloodline behave like family. Blind favoritism and manipulative psychology are a slow poison that kills children yearning for love. You can't change how others treated you in the past, but you have complete control over who is allowed into your future. Never let your self-esteem be manipulated by those who don't appreciate you. Protecting your finances, your mental health, and refusing to become a life raft for those who deliberately try to sink their own ship isn't selfishness. It's absolute self-respect. Filial piety or sibling affection doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your own happiness to pay the price for their repeated mistakes. Be brave enough to cut the toxic ties, build a family of your own choosing, and live the most vibrant life possible. That is the most powerful response. Thank you for patiently listening to my entire journey. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What was the most valuable lesson or moment in this story? Please share your perspective below, or simply comment "good" to let me know you appreciate the lessons the story offers. Your companionship is invaluable. See you in the next story.